right, so today we're going to be looking at lesson 20-2, dealing with 30, 60, 90 triangles. So we're going to start off by drawing a 30, 60, 90 degree triangle. We know that we're going to have a right angle because we have a 90 degree angle. Then the 30 degrees is my smaller angle compared to the 60, so it is going to go in the smaller looking angle. And I'm going to put my 60 down here. And it may not be 100% to scale, but that's close enough. So you look, which one of these looks like the shorter leg? Hopefully you see it's the bottom, the base here, and that is opposite the 30 degree angle. So the shorter leg is opposite the 30 degree angle. Then the longer leg is this one, and it is opposite the 60 degree angle. And so now we are going to look at the side lengths. If I know my shorter leg, so I'm going to label it as S. Your hypotenuse is going to be 2 times the shorter leg. So if your shorter leg is known, all you're going to need to do is multiply by 2 to find the hypotenuse. If you are looking for your longer leg, you're going to multiply by the square root of 3. So multiply by square root of 3 to find the longer leg. And so that is the ratios that we can use here. Now, if you don't know the shorter leg, let's say you know the longer leg. To go from the longer leg to the shorter leg, we are going to divide by the square root of 3. The other option, if you go back to what we looked at in the previous lesson, we divided by square root of 2 or multiplied by square root of 2 over 2. So here, we can divide by square root of 3 or multiply by square root of 3 over 3. And that's to find the shorter leg. If you know your longer leg and you're trying to get to your hypotenuse, what you can do is multiply by 2 square roots of 3 over 3, and that's to get your hypotenuse. And some of you may say, whoa, 2 square roots of 3 over 3, that's a little bit much. We're going to do a problem, and I'm going to show you. You can do this one. You can use this one, but you're not going to have to. So if you're like 2 square roots of 3 over 3, that's just too much. You don't have to use that one. We'll go over what you are going to have to practice using. Let's say if you know your hypotenuse. So if I know my hypotenuse, what do I need to do to get back to my side? You're going to divide by 2 to get the shorter leg. Or if you were trying to get to your longer leg, you can multiply by square root of 3 over 2 to get the longer leg. So those are your rules if you would like to use those. So let's look at some examples because it's going to make a lot more sense when you start practicing with these. If you are given, on number 1, we're given the shorter leg. So we're going to be using the top rules. To find the hypotenuse, you're going to multiply by 2. So 1/2 times 2 is 1. So x equals 1. To find your longer leg, you're going to multiply by the square root of 3. So 1/2 times the square root of 3, we have square root of 3 over 1. 1 times square root of 3, square root of 3, and then 2 times 1 is 2. So we have, for y, square root of 3 over 2. Looking at the next one, again we have the shorter leg. So if we're looking for the hypotenuse, you're going to multiply by 2. So 8 times 2 is 16. So my y is 16. If I'm looking for my longer leg, I'm going to take my shorter leg and then multiply it by the square root of 3. And so I get 8 square roots of 3. Let's look at number 3. This time they don't give us the shorter leg, they give us the hypotenuse. So what I'm going to do is divide by 2 to get my shorter leg. So 11 divided by 2 is just 11 over 2, and so that's my x value. Then the y value. I could use this multiply by square root of 3 over 2. So 11 times square root of 3 over 2 is 11 square root of 3 over 2. Or the other option is to go back to this shorter leg one and multiply my shorter leg by square root of 3. So I have 11 over 2 times the square root of 3. So I get 11 square root of 3 over 2 for my y value. So either way, you get the same thing. It's just which ones do you want to remember? If you want to remember the fewest number possible, you're going to want to know these two about the shorter leg and then how to get to the shorter leg from the longer leg and from the hypotenuse. And if you remember those 4, you don't actually have to remember those 2. So that's up to you. It just depends on what you want to work through. So let's look at number 4. They give us the longer leg on this one. So if the longer leg is known, we need to either divide by square root of 3 or multiply by square root of 3 over 3 to get the shorter leg. So since I already have a radical, I'm going to just divide by the square root of 3. And if you notice, your square root of 3's cancel. And so that means that my shorter leg is just 9. Then my longer leg. Once I know my shorter leg, my longer leg is just going to get multiplied by 2. So that means that my hypotenuse is going to be 18. So now let's look at number 5. It gives us the longer leg again. So on this one, when I take my longer leg and divide by square root of 3, I'm going to have to rationalize this. So multiply by square root of 3 over square root of 3. And that's going to give me 12 times square root of 3 over the square root of 9. The square root of 9 we know is 3. And this 12 divided by 3 is just 4. So we have 4 square roots of 3. And then, once I know my shorter leg, I can go back and multiply it by 2 to get the hypotenuse. So when you multiply by 2, you only multiply the 4 by 2 to get 8, and then you leave the radical as is. It's kind of like if you have 2 times x and you multiply it by 2, or here, I'll change it to 4 so it's more consistent. 4 times x and multiply it by 2. 4 times 2 is 8, but the x just stays as an x. Same idea with that radical. So let's look at number 6. They give us the hypotenuse. So if we know the hypotenuse, divide it by 2 to get your shorter leg. So 20 divided by 2 is 10. So our shorter leg is 10. And then if you multiply that by square root of 3, you get 10 square roots of 3 for your longer leg. So that's how you work through some of those. So I want you to pause the video and try and work through 7, 8, 9, and 10 on the next row and just see if you can work through them. Okay, so now let's look and see if we can figure out what we should do here. On number 7, they give us a shorter leg. So we're going to multiply by 2 to get our hypotenuse, so 18. And then if we know that our shorter leg is 9, multiply it by the square root of 3 to get our hypotenuse. To get our longer leg, 9 square roots of 3. Now looking at number 8, they gave us the hypotenuse, so we divide it by 2 to get our shorter leg. So 4 divided by 2 is 2 square roots of 3. Then your longer leg is that number times the square root of 3. So we have 2 square roots of 3 times the square root of 3. Square root of 3 times square root of 3 is square root of 9, which is just 3. So I get 6. Looking at number 9, we have that the shorter leg is 10. So if I double it, multiply it by 2, I have my hypotenuse. And if I multiply the shorter leg by square root of 3, I have my longer leg. So now let's look at number 10. they gave me the hypotenuse. So divide by 2 to get your shorter leg. So 98 divided by 2 is 49. Then multiply that number by square root of 3 to get your longer leg. Okay? So another option with these is very similar to what I showed you, the other option with the 45, 45, 90 triangle. All 30, 60, 90 triangles are in a ratio. And if you let your S, your side length, be a 1, you'll get that ratio. So if I have my 60-degree angle, my right angle, and my 30-degree angle, I have my 1 and S times square root of 3. 1 square root of 3 is just square root of 3, and then 2 times 1 is just 2. And I want to point out something that I hadn't mentioned. The square root of 3 and the 30 degrees are adjacent to each other. They're on the same figure. Some people get the square root of 2 from the 45, 45, 90 triangle and the square root of 3 mixed up. The 3's happen on the same figure. The 45, 45, 90 triangle doesn't have a 3 in its angle, so it doesn't have a 3 in its radical. So the square root of 3 and the 30 degrees go adjacent to each other. So we can use this 1 square root of 3, 2 triangle and create ratios if you would prefer to do that. So if you look at one like number 11, if you want to use the ratios, the 30 degrees are in the same spot. So the 5 square root of 3 is corresponding with the 1. So we could say 5 square root of 3 over 1. And then the x and the square root of 3 are corresponding. So 5 square root of 3 to 1, x to square root of 3. And then you can cross multiply. 1 times x is just x. And then 5 square root of 3 times square root of 3. Square root of 3 times square root of 3 is just the square root of 9, which is 3. So you get 15 for x. Then you could do the same idea if you're looking for y. So you could do 5 square root of 3 over 1 equals y over 2. And so when you cross multiply, you would get y equals 10 square root of 3. So if you want to use similar triangles and set up proportion, you could do it that way. So let's look at number 10. They tell us the hypotenuse is 8 square root of 3. So if you want to do it using the rules, divide by 2. So 8 divided by 2 is 4 square root of 3. You don't mess with the radical. The radical doesn't get divided by 2. You leave it as square root of 3. Then we take that number and double it. So multiply by 2. No, not by 2, by square root of 3. So we take 4 square roots of 3 and multiply it by square root of 3 to get the longer leg. So you have square root of 3 times square root of 3, which is square root of 9. But square root of 9 is just a 3. So we really have 12. So your x value would be 12. If you look at number 9, they give us the shorter leg. So multiply by 2 to get 22 for the hypotenuse. Multiply by square root of 3 to get your longer leg. Looking at this last row, if you look at number 12, they give you 30. So divide by 2 gets you 15. Multiply that by square root of 3 to get the longer leg. On 13, they give us the longer leg. So we are going to divide that by square root of 3. And your radicals cancel, and so you're left with 21 for your shorter leg, and then double that to get 42 for your hypotenuse. Looking at the last one, they give us the hypotenuse. So if we divide it by 2, we will get our shorter leg. So 52 square roots of 3 divided by 2. 52 over 2 is 26, and then we have square root of 3. So that's y. Then for this side length, it's x. Take your shorter side and multiply it by the square root of 3. So we have 26 times the square root of 9, which is 26 times 3, which is 78. So hopefully that helps you with understanding how you can do 30, 60, 90 triangles. The most important thing is that you pick a method that you prefer and continue practicing until you're proficient with that method. I would not recommend switching up the methods unless you're good with understanding multiple ones. If you're having trouble, pick one and work with it. And don't try and go back and forth. because then you're going to get mixed up on which type of method you're using. So hopefully that's helpful for you.